The Clearwater Bay Resort stretched across 12 acres of prime beachfront property on the North Carolina coast. White sand beaches, infinity pools, a five-star restaurant, and rooms that started at $800 per night. It was exactly the kind of place my family loved to flaunt their success. I'd owned it for 3 years. They had no idea. The family reunion invitation had arrived 6 weeks ago, my mother's elegant handwriting announcing that this year's gathering would be held at an exclusive coastal resort. The subtext was clear. Come prepared to be impressed and definitely come prepared to feel inadequate. I arrived on Friday afternoon in my usual style. Jeans, a comfortable t-shirt, my trusty Honda Civic pulling into the circular drive behind a parade of Mercedes, BMWs and Teslas. The valet gave my car a barely concealed look of disdain before handing me a ticket. "Enjoy your stay," he said with the kind of polite dismissal reserved for guests who clearly couldn't afford the daily parking fee. I smiled and headed inside. The lobby was stunning, all soaring ceilings and ocean views, with marble floors that caught the afternoon light. I'd approved the redesign myself 2 years ago, though my family would never know that. To them I was still Emily, the family underachiever with the boring computer job. "Emily. Over here." My mother waved from a cluster of chairs near the windows, surrounded by my aunts, uncles and various cousins. They'd clearly been there for a while, drinks in hand, already settling into the familiar dynamic of family hierarchy. "There you are," Mom said as I approached, her eyes sweeping over my outfit with obvious disappointment. "We've been here since noon. The check-in process was impeccable. This place really knows how to treat guests properly." "It's beautiful," I agreed, meaning it. "Isn't it?" Aunt Sarah chimed in. She was my mother's younger sister, always competing to prove her own success. "Harold and I stayed at a resort in the Bahamas last month that was lovely, but this might actually surpass it. The room rates alone tell you the caliber of guests they attract," Mom said pointedly. $800 per night for a standard room. We're in an ocean view suite, of course. $2,000 per night. Worth every penny, Uncle Harold added, swirling his whiskey. "You can't put a price on quality." I took a seat on the edge of the group, already familiar with my role. The audience. The one who was supposed to be awed by their expensive choices and lavish lifestyle. "How was your drive down, Emily?" Aunt Carol asked, my mother's oldest sister. She at least made an effort to include me in conversations. "Not bad. About 5 hours from the city." "Still in that tiny apartment?" Mom asked, though she knew the answer. "It works for me." "So cramped," she said with a theatrical sigh. "I don't know how you manage. Our house in Raleigh has 6 bedrooms, and sometimes even that feels too small when we're entertaining." "Different priorities," I said evenly. My cousin Jessica, Aunt Sarah's daughter, looked up from her phone. "Are you still doing that data thing?" "Data analysis, yes." "Sounds boring," she said, returning to her screen. Jessica was 25, worked in marketing for her father's company, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of her MBA from Duke. "It pays the bills," I said. "Barely, I imagine," Aunt Sarah said with false sympathy. "Those tech jobs are so unstable these days. Harold was just saying how many layoffs there've been in that sector." "My company is doing fine," I said. "Your company?" Mom laughed. "Emily, you work for a company. You don't own one." I could have corrected her. Could have explained that I'd founded Thomson Analytics 6 years ago, that we'd gone from 3 employees to 47, that our client list included some of the biggest investment firms on the East Coast. But I'd learned this lesson already. They didn't listen. "Right," I said instead. "My mistake." The afternoon wore on in the familiar pattern. My aunts compared their recent purchases, designer handbags, jewelry, cars. My uncles discussed their golf handicaps and investment portfolios. My cousins scrolled through their phones and occasionally chimed in with stories about their impressive jobs, expensive apartments and active social lives. I mostly listened, offering polite comments when required. "Dinner is at 7 in the main restaurant," Mom announced around 6 o'clock. "Make sure you dress appropriately, everyone. This isn't some casual beach shack. They have standards." That last part was directed at me, of course. "I brought something nice," I assured her. "Nice by whose standards?" Aunt Sarah asked with a little laugh. "No offense, dear, but your idea of nice and this resort's dress code might not align." "I'll manage," I said. Back in my room, an ocean view suite that I'd reserved under my name without anyone noticing, I changed into a simple black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. One of the few concessions I made to my actual financial status was quality clothing. I just rarely wore it around my family. The main restaurant was as impressive as everything else at Clearwater Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, white tablecloths, candlelight reflecting off crystal glasses. I'd hired the executive chef away from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Charleston, and the results had been worth every penny. My family had already gathered at a large table near the windows, and I could see Mom holding court, gesturing animatedly as she described something to the others. "Emily," she called when she spotted me. "There you are. We were just discussing the wine list. Absolutely impressive selection." I took my seat at the far end of the table next to Cousin Michael, who was too absorbed in a work call to acknowledge my presence. "The sommelier recommended this Bordeaux," Uncle Harold was saying, holding up his glass. $200 a bottle, but you can taste the quality." "We should order several bottles for the table," Aunt Sarah suggested. "Split the cost among all of us." "Actually," Mom said quickly, "let's just have those of us who appreciate fine wine split the cost. No need to burden everyone." She glanced at me as she said it. The implication was clear. I couldn't afford to contribute. "I'm fine with water," I said, which was true. I rarely drank and certainly didn't need to prove anything with expensive wine. "See," Mom said as if I'd just confirmed her point. "Emily is perfectly content with her simple choices." Dinner arrived in courses, each one more elaborate than the last. Seared scallops, lobster bisque, dry-aged ribeye, deconstructed key lime pie. My family exclaimed over every dish, praised the presentation, discussed the flavor profiles with the kind of performative sophistication that came from reading too many food blogs. "This must be what it's like to eat at the really elite establishments," Jessica said, posting a photo of her ribeye to Instagram. "Not the chain restaurants normal people go to." "Normal people," Aunt Carol repeated with a laugh. "You mean like Emily's usual spots?" "I'm sure Emily enjoys her meals," Mom said with false kindness. "Not everyone has refined palates. There's no shame in preferring simple food." I cut into my ribeye, perfectly cooked exactly as I'd instructed Chef Marcus to prepare it, and said nothing. "The thing about truly luxury experiences," Uncle Harold continued, warming to his favorite topic, "is that you can't appreciate them until you've reached a certain level in life. No amount of explanation can convey what it feels like to enjoy the finer things when you've earned them." "Earned being the key word," Aunt Sarah added. "Anyone can go into debt to pretend they belong at places like this. But actually belonging, actually having the means to enjoy it without stress, that's the real marker of success." "Speaking of which," Jessica said, "Dad, didn't you say you were considering buying a vacation property down here? Somewhere we could use for family gatherings." "I've been looking," Harold admitted. "But the real estate prices on this stretch of coast are astronomical. We're talking multi-million-dollar properties for anything decent." "What about the resort itself?" my cousin Brandon asked. "Does anyone know who owns it? Might be a good investment opportunity." "Some investment group probably," Harold said dismissively. "These luxury resorts are usually owned by corporations or wealthy families. Not the kind of thing individual investors can get into." I took a sip of water. "It would be nice to have a place like this to call our own," Mom mused. "Somewhere the family could gather without having to pay these exorbitant rates. Though I suppose that's just a fantasy. This level of property is beyond most people's reach." "Beyond some people's reach," Aunt Sarah corrected with a pointed look around the table. "Others of us are doing quite well, thank you very much." The conversation shifted to their various financial successes. Uncle Harold's latest business deal. Aunt Sarah's stock portfolio. Jessica's promotion. Brandon's new condo in Charlotte. And then, inevitably, it shifted to me. "So, Emily," Uncle Harold said with the kind of forced joviality people use when they're about to make someone uncomfortable, "still living in that studio apartment?" "One bedroom actually," I corrected mildly. "One bedroom, of course. And still driving that old Honda. It's reliable." "Reliable," he repeated with a chuckle. "That's one way to look at it. I suppose when you're on a budget, reliability matters more than comfort or style." "Harold," Aunt Carol said softly, "maybe. I'm just being realistic. he interrupted. Emily is what, 30 years old now? 29, I said. 29, right. At 29, most people in this family have established themselves. Good jobs, nice homes, the beginnings of real wealth. But Emily here is still in an entry-level position, still renting, still driving a car that's probably older than some of the staff here. It's a different path, Aunt Carol tried again. It's a lower path, Aunt Sarah said bluntly. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be successful. Someone has to be average. Mom nodded slowly. I've accepted that Emily isn't going to reach the heights we hoped for. She's content with less, and that's fine. Different people have different capacities. The table had gone quiet, everyone either staring at me with pity or carefully avoiding eye contact. The important thing, Mom continued, is that we don't make Emily feel bad about her limitations. She's doing the best she can with what she has. I set down my fork carefully. That's very understanding of you, I said quietly. We're family, Mom said warmly. We support each other regardless of success level. Even if you can't contribute financially to family gatherings like this, your presence still means something. Though speaking of contribution, Aunt Sarah said, we should probably discuss how we're splitting the costs for this weekend. The rooms, the meals, the activities we have planned. Obviously we'll divide it among those who can afford it, Mom said quickly. Emily, don't worry about it. We'll cover your share. That's not necessary, I started to say. Please, Uncle Harold interrupted. We know you're struggling. Let us help. That's what family does. I'm not struggling, I said calmly. Emily, honey, Mom said with gentle condescension, we've seen your apartment. We know what you drive. We understand your salary can't be very impressive. There's no shame in accepting help. I don't need help, I said. Pride, Aunt Sarah said sadly. That's the problem with young people today. Too proud to accept reality. I could feel the familiar frustration building. The same conversation we'd had in different forms for years. No matter what I said, they'd already decided who I was. You don't belong at this level, Mom said finally, her voice taking on a harder edge. And I don't mean that cruelly, Emily. I mean it realistically. This resort, this lifestyle, these experiences, they're for people who've earned them. You haven't. Not yet. Maybe someday if you work hard and make better choices you'll get there. But right now, you're out of your depth. She should stick to motels, Aunt Sarah agreed. Nothing wrong with motels. They're perfectly adequate for people in Emily's situation. The entire restaurant seemed to have gone quiet, though that was probably my imagination. Still, I was aware of people at nearby tables glancing our way. You know what? I said, starting to stand. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should. Miss Thompson. I turned to find Richard Chin, the resort's director, standing beside our table. Richard was 58, had managed luxury properties around the world, and had been my first major hire when I bought Clearwater Bay 3 years ago. Yes. I said. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Richard said smoothly, but there's a matter that requires your attention. The contractors finished the renovations on the spa building, and they need your approval before they can proceed with the landscaping. The table had gone silent. Contractors. Mom said faintly. Richard didn't even glance at her. His attention remained fixed on me. Also, he continued, the architect sent over the final plans for the new beachfront villas. I have them in my office whenever you're ready to review them. And the quarterly financial reports came in today. Revenue is up 18% from last quarter. The restaurant is operating at capacity most nights, and we're fully booked through the next 6 months. That's excellent news, I said. Thank you, Richard. Of course. Oh, and your usual suite has been prepared for the remainder of your stay. I know you booked the Ocean View room for this weekend, but your private residence is always available if you prefer. Ocean View is fine, I said. Very good. Will you be attending the staff meeting tomorrow morning? The management team would appreciate your input on the expansion plans. I'll be there, I said. Richard nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Forgive me, but are these guests bothering you? I can have them moved to a different table if you'd prefer. That won't be necessary, I said. They're family. Ah, Richard said with perfect professional neutrality. Of course. Enjoy your dinner. He walked away, leaving absolute silence at our table. Mom's face had gone white. Aunt Sarah's mouth was hanging open. Uncle Harold looked like he'd been struck. Emily. Mom finally whispered. What was that about? That was Richard Chin, I said calmly, sitting back down. He's the resort director. He reports to me. Reports to you? Aunt Sarah repeated weakly. I own Clearwater Bay Resort, I said simply. I bought it 3 years ago. The renovations Richard mentioned are part of the expansion I've been planning. We're adding 6 new beachfront villas, upgrading the spa, and expanding the restaurant to include a private dining room for events. The silence stretched on. Own this place? Uncle Harold said. Yes. The entire resort? Jessica asked, her phone forgotten in her hand. The resort, the beach, the restaurant, all 12 acres. I purchased it for $47 million in 2021. It's now valued at approximately $68 million, thanks to the improvements and reputation we've built. 47 million, Mom repeated faintly. The financing was straightforward, I continued. My company, Thomson Analytics, had been doing very well. We provide financial modeling and data analysis for investment firms. I founded it 6 years ago with 2 employees. We now have 47 staff members and offices in New York, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Our annual revenue last year was $32 million. Aunt Carol was staring at me with wide eyes. Emily, why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said. Multiple times. But you'd already decided I was a failure, so nothing I said mattered. When I invited you to my company's launch party, you said it sounded boring. When I mentioned buying property, you assumed I meant a condo and made jokes about my starter home. When I tried to discuss my work, you changed the subject. But the apartment, Mom said weakly. The car. I like my apartment. It's a 15-minute walk from my office and I don't need much space since I travel frequently between our locations. As for the car, it's reliable and efficient. I don't need to impress anyone with what I drive. The room rates, Aunt Sarah whispered. You said they were $800 per night. For standard guests, yes. Obviously, I don't charge myself to stay at my own resort. But you wouldn't know that because you assumed I was staying in a standard room and struggling to afford it. Uncle Harold had recovered enough to look indignant. If you own this place, why let us go on thinking you were paying full price? Because I wanted to see, I said simply. I wanted to see if you'd treat me differently based on what you thought I could afford. And you did. You spent the entire evening mocking my supposed poverty, offering to help me with costs I don't need help with, telling me I don't belong at this level. We didn't know, Mom protested. Exactly, I said. You didn't know and you didn't care to know. You assumed and you judged and you treated me accordingly. But Emily, Aunt Carol said gently, why not just tell us the truth? Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd sat down at this table tonight and said, by the way, I own this resort, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was delusional or lying? The silence was my answer. I built something real, I continued. I created a successful company from nothing, invested wisely, and bought a property I'm passionate about improving. I did it all without your help, without your approval, and without your knowledge. And the whole time you assumed I was failing. We thought we were being supportive, Mom said weakly. Supportive. I repeated. You told me I don't belong at this level. You said I should stick to motels. You've spent years making me feel small so you could feel big. The restaurant had definitely gone quiet now. Other diners were watching openly, some with phones out. What happens now? Uncle Harold asked quietly. Now, I said, you finish your dinner. The meal is complimentary, of course. I comp all family meals. I have been for 3 years, actually. Every time you've visited Clearwater Bay, every meal you've charged to your room, every spa treatment and beach service. I've been covering it. You've been paying for us? Aunt Sarah asked. Every visit, I confirmed. Because despite everything you're still family. And I wanted you to enjoy yourselves, even if you didn't think I belonged here. Mom had tears in her eyes now. Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. No, I interrupted gently. You're sorry you were wrong. That's different from being sorry for how you treated me. You spent years making me feel inadequate and you enjoyed it. The only thing that's changed is now you know I'm successful, so you have to adjust your narrative. That's not fair, Jessica protested. Isn't it? I asked. 5 minutes ago you were all agreeing that I'm average, that I have limitations, that I can't appreciate fine dining or luxury experiences. Now that you know I own this place, suddenly you want to apologize. No one had an answer for that. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. Enjoy the resort. Your rooms are paid for as always. But I think I'll take my meals separately for the rest of the weekend. Emily, please, Mom said, reaching for my hand. Don't go like this. Let's talk about this. We've been talking, I said quietly. For years. You just haven't been listening. I walked away from the table, aware of every eye in the restaurant following me. Richard met me near the entrance, his professional composure firmly in place. Everything all right, Miss Thompson? He asked quietly. Fine, I said. Just a family matter. I apologize if my interruption caused any complications. You did exactly right, I assured him. They were planning to help me pay for dinner since they assumed I couldn't afford it. Richard's expression didn't change, but I saw something flash in his eyes. I see. Shall I arrange for separate dining accommodations for the remainder of their stay? That won't be necessary. I'll take my meals in my suite. They can have the restaurant. Of course. I'll have Chef Marcus prepare something special and send it up. Thank you, Richard. I headed toward the elevators, my phone already buzzing with texts. Aunt Sarah. Jessica. All of them wanting to explain, to apologize, to make excuses. I turned my phone off. Back in my suite, the owner's residence, which took up the entire top floor of the main building, I stood at the windows overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. I'd bought this place for exactly this view. For the peace of the ocean, for the sound of waves, for the reminder that some things were bigger than family drama and social hierarchies. My phone buzzed again. I'd forgotten to fully power it off. One last message, this one from Aunt Carol. I'm proud of you, Emily. Always have been. I'm sorry I didn't say it more. That one, I answered. Thank you. That means something. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a room service cart with covered dishes and a bottle of wine. Compliments of Chef Marcus, the server said. He said to tell you congratulations on a successful quarterly report. I smiled. Please tell him thank you. Alone again, I uncovered the dishes. Marcus had prepared my favorite. A simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil, a side of roasted vegetables, and a slice of his famous chocolate torte. No performance. No pretense. Just good food prepared by someone who knew what I actually liked. I ate on the balcony, watching the stars come out over the ocean, listening to the waves. Tomorrow I'd meet with the management team about the expansion plans. Next week I'd fly to Charlotte for a client presentation. Next month we'd break ground on the new villas. My family would adjust or they wouldn't. Either way I'd keep building. The resort phone rang. I answered to find Richard on the line. I apologize for the late call, Miss Thompson. Your mother is in the lobby requesting to speak with you. Tell her I'm not available tonight, I said. But she can leave a message and I'll consider meeting with her tomorrow. Of course. Also, I wanted to mention, several of your family members have been asking staff questions about you. Whether you really own the property, what your role is, how long you've been the owner. And what are you telling them? The truth, Richard said simply. That you purchased Clearwater Bay 3 years ago, that you've personally overseen every aspect of its renovation and growth, and that you're one of the most hands-on owners I've worked with in 30 years of hospitality management. Thank you, Richard. It's simply the truth, he repeated. Good night, Miss Thompson. I hung up and returned to the balcony, my chocolate torte half finished. They'd know everything by morning. The questions they'd asked staff would spread through the resort, and by breakfast, every employee would know that the family who'd been so dismissive of me at dinner had no idea who I actually was. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. I'd spent years building something meaningful, creating jobs, providing experiences, investing in a property I believed in. And the whole time the people who were supposed to know me best had assumed I was failing. Maybe that said more about them than it did about me. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Uncle Harold. We need to talk about investment opportunities. I'd like to discuss partnering on your next property acquisition. I deleted it without responding. They still didn't get it. They thought now that they knew about my success they could capitalize on it, benefit from it, be part of it. But they'd had years to be part of my life and they'd chosen judgment instead. The ocean stretched out before me, dark and endless. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon were other properties, other opportunities, other dreams to build. I'd build them alone if I had to. I'd been doing it that way all along.